Yeah, that's
It's really good. It's really helpful.
Oh, I'm sure.
But anyway, I guess we have to
Have a
believe
book
in the
for you,
next
sir.
season,
One of
my
the
fall
books
and
they gave
daily.
us, and we have like
So
it's
that's
yours to
something.
do whatever you choose
I
to.
appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I hear cicadas down there.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I've seen one.
Okay.
it is time to begin our session. Time to begin. We'll begin with a prayer.
All right.
Help us to see what we can learn about Simon Peter, and even what it says about Jesus too. And then finally, what does it say about us? A little different one. Where Capernaum is, and according to the maps I've been able to, it's about 25 miles north and east over to Caesarea Philippi. Now what's interesting is I just came in a little bit closer here. Not much you can see there. I did one couple more. This is Mount Hermon, which is supposed to be, I think it's the largest mountain there. There's a discussion about whether this is where Jesus was transfigured. Traditionally, Mount Tabor is the location, but then some people say the Gospels show it does not. So it could be here or here, but we'll be right over here for our unit today. That area here looks nice. You ready to go? Apparently not today.
Judy's ready to go.
So you can see a little area down there. This is the interesting location, the cave, where there's all sorts of religious things associated with it, worship of Pan, among others. There was a synagogue there. We'll come back. Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. We're coming back. Show you a couple more here. One of the roads through. So this stuff, it's interesting. So our text will say, when the question is asked, who do people say that I am? What are the answers? Number one is
Isaiah.
John the Baptist. Another answer could be,
Elijah.
this is a statue of Elijah. He's got a kind of crooked sword there, doesn't he? A little bit. And this is supposed to be
That's
the seal of Jeremiah, because or one of the prophets. Jeremiah could be one of the other prophets. This is a tomb of Samuel type thing. This is a picture, statue of Peter at Capernaum. Peter being important, of course, interestingly. Why did they throw this one in? Because that's all about here. Symbol, you are Messiah, Christ, nice thing. So here we're back to the river that comes out and this cave.
And that's what I wanted to talk about, because when Judy and I were there, you could feel the presence of evil. You really could. And what they were saying that was when Pan was worshipped, he's not that cute little figure we make cartoons out of. He's pretty evil. And people used to go up and they had to sacrifice their babies by throwing them into the ground, into that river. And you could still feel the evil.
Do you know where the word panic comes from?
Oh,
Seriously,
really?
from Pan. Because as part of worship type things, the sounds and all would be, and it could cause a panic that we have, interestingly enough. Now the question is, and this is which is much discussed in this area, is this, this is not interesting. This is the church of the primacy of St. Peter. So this is an interesting thing. I find it fascinating that in the middle of the church there's this big rock, and it has on there, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." You know, Jesus did speak King James English, of course. That's the translation that's used there. This is a gate. So, you know, the gates of Hades will not
prevail
against it. So here we're looking down into the cave. Here's the water and all. So the question is, and this is much discussed in biblical literature, whether Jesus went there and this was all to show, you know, this is the gate of Hades, because Hades is thought to have been there as well, or an entrance to it and all. Some say yes, and some say no. So you can make your own decision up, you know, depending which Bible scholar you listen to. I think part of it is Jesus was getting farther away from the religious authorities myself. Sacred cave, sacred cave, sacred cave. Oh, this is a statue of Hades. Why would you do a statue of Hades? But they have statues of all sorts of things. And again, a statue of Hades. I don't know. And then this is from Isaiah 38:10 about the gates of Sheol, which Jesus says the gates of hell shall not go against it. And then we have Peter being given, notice what he's being given? Keys of the kingdom. Yeah. We might go back. I think I have a couple more pictures. But let's jump into our text. We looked at this a little bit as we were doing other things. But I think this is still worth it, because this is a very important thing. If you accept the point that Jesus had a three-year ministry, this is probably he's been with his disciples over 2 years. At this point, would be the best guess. Maybe it's about 6 months away from Calvary. You would think that the 12 would understand who he is by now. They'd have a pretty good clue. And yet in Mark 8:21, which is around the same area here, Jesus asked them, do you still not understand? And they still don't truly understand. All of the synoptics have this little story, quote unquote, significant that after the profession comes the revelation of the transfiguration. That's why I showed you the mountain. Is it the one they just went a little farther up to that, Mount Hermon, or they went down to Mount Tabor? I don't know which it is. Tradition says Tabor, but you're free to choose whichever. And this is the part on Pan I wanted to read to you. Got this from Michael Card. Caesar Philippi was the site of the ancient city of Panias. The name of the city was derived from the god Pan. A limestone cave was there containing an altar where the pagan deity was worshipped by Syrian Greeks. Later, Herod the Great would change the name of the town in honor of Caesar Augustus. There he would build a temple where Augustus would be worshipped as a god. The temple was near the grotto of Pan. The area was no doubt filled with pagan associations for both Jesus and his disciples. In light of the surroundings, this is the perfect place to hear the affirmation that it is neither Pan nor Augustus, but Jesus, who is the Son of the living God. And so Card would agree that the area is chosen for that religious reason. Again, there are going to be 2 questions. I think that's interesting. Verse 13. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? What do you think about their answers? So if it has been a couple of years, okay, it's been a couple of years, these are the things they're hearing. What do you think about the answers?
Well,
Why Elijah? What's the problem with it being Elijah? Could he be Elijah? Elijah was unique in what sense?
He never died.
He was
Right?
taken up to heaven alive. But he
If
can
he's
come back.
taken up,
God can send him back as easily as he can take him up in a fiery chariot.
what's the reason not to be Elijah?
Because he wasn't.
And Jesus already said that if you accept it, this is Matthew 11:14, that he is Elijah. I'm sorry, that John the Baptist is Elijah. And so Jesus already pointed to whom John was. It's not me. I'm not. So he took that one off. How about, let's see. I'm sorry, I just messed that up. John the Baptist, Elijah. Elijah, again, Jesus would say that John the Baptist is, right? I guess John the Baptist, what's the problem with John the Baptist? Jesus being called John the Baptist? Yeah, they were contemporaneous, right?
Yeah.
Jesus had been with him.
Yeah.
So that couldn't be. And then you always say, what's the third possibility?
Jeremiah or a prophet.
One of the prophets, right? You could always use one of the prophets. You know, there was, and Moses said that God will send another prophet like me. So there was that promise in the Old Testament. And so perhaps it's that. Do you think the disciples talked about who Jesus was? Do you think they were talking about that? Now, at different times, they say interesting things about him, right? Peter walking on the water, what did he say? You're the Christ, right? I mean, there are these times. We've gone through John 6, surely by this time, the feeding of the 5,000. Peter made a pretty strong thing, if you were with us in service or whatever, you're the Son of the living God. I mean, that's a pretty big statement of faith. So it's interesting that there are all of these thoughts, but they did not suggest, the thing that always interests me is they did not suggest that someone is saying that he is the Messiah. That's what I find interesting here. And I find that interesting because, well, if we go back to John 6 and Jesus' feeding of the 5,000, as John explains it, what did the people want to do?
Make him a king.
Make him a king. So they knew he was something. So nobody said he's king.
Well, one of the things is he chose a bunch of fishermen who were not theologians. And Judy and I studied from a man who decided he had to go to Israel to get the rest of the story. And what he found was that there were certain miracles that had to be performed by Messiah. And those miracles, one by one, were what Jesus did, or what was recorded. So they wouldn't have realized that those were the tests for a Messiah, perhaps. They just knew he was something interesting, powerful, whatever.
Well, I think that the issue with that is that we would usually call those Isaianic signs, the signs that are said by the prophet Isaiah that Messiah would do. Yeah. And if you look at what Jesus was doing, he's healing the sick, that's what Messiah would do. He has power over nature, that's what Messiah would do. I mean, all of these things he's doing, and the point of them not realizing is they experienced all these things, right? I mean, the disciples are experiencing all of these things. Even Matthias had to be there because remember, he was chosen as an apostle. He's one that's chosen because he had to be there from the beginning. And so all of these people had to be there. There's more than just 12 following Jesus, although in John 6 it talks about some people falling away. So Jesus has been doing all of these things. And it's not until here, when this is, at least in my reading, can you tell me of a time Jesus asked his disciples who he was before this? The other interesting thing is, can you find one where Jesus asked his disciples who he is after this? This is the unique time when Jesus tells them, right? Ask them the question. Now he will then say what it means 3 times. We call those passion predictions generally, but he will say that. But this is the first and only time, it seems to me, that he really asks them, who do you think I am? Mr. Tim, you were waving your hand, sorry.
Well, I've always felt that, to answer your question about did they discuss who this man was, can you imagine somebody walking into your life and asking you to become a fisher of men, especially a fisherman, and that he asked you to drop everything and follow him? That would provoke thought and discussion. I mean, can you imagine what that must have been like to be in his presence? To know that you just dropped everything and followed him.
In John's Gospel, what is the first miraculous sign Jesus does? Anybody know?
The wine.
Water into wine. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with that one, but the disciples knew what happened. Can you do that? Change water into wine? Something unique. There's something about Jesus. I'd have to say that. But look at the question. Then, let's see. Verse 14, we've looked at that. Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Jeremiah would be a good suggestion, but always one of the prophets. Always throw that in, I guess. But he then takes it from others and he asks them, brings it down directly to them. But you, who do you say that I am? The answer is interesting to me. It's not, we say that, right? It's, Instead, it's spoken differently. It's, of course, it's Peter who answers. Would you expect anybody else to answer besides Peter? Simon Peter's always the one that answers. Who else would have said anything? Of all the disciples, who do you think could have been another person to speak such things?
John.
Well, possibly John, yeah. How about Andrew?
Oh.
Nobody says Andrew ever, right? Nothing, no. So maybe Andrew is poking Simon, going, "Who's the Messiah, the Christ to come?" I don't know. Doesn't say that or anything. But look at what the words are. Verse 16. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. I put Christos there because the word, at least in the text, is the Greek form, and the translation puts Messiah, which would be the Hebrew form, but that's okay. And it is, the reason I have the underlined of Son is because there is a direct object. I mean, there is the is there, so it's true. And it's the God, it's the living God. The God, the living one, so the living God. So it's a pretty big statement of faith, isn't it? Would you agree with that? That's a pretty big statement of faith. He says who he is. But think what Simon is doing. He is ascribing divinity to Jesus. That's a big deal. Why is it such a big deal?
It's incomprehensible, for one thing.
Okay.
And the Jews believed in one God, and they said, I mean, all of their proclamations of their faith was one God.
Yeah.
So it would be hard to see somebody else as being part of that one.
And to suggest that Jesus is the Son of the living God is to say that he is God.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big thing. It's a really big thing. And I think sometimes we go, oh yeah, Zoom. But that, I mean, I was supposed to do a wedding, and it was interesting. I got sick, couldn't do it. Somebody did it for me. But the receptionist for our dentist, I think that's what it was, she was going to get married. Well, I kept after me, I said, I guess so. Well, then it got real interesting because her fiance was Muslim, and she was not. And so first question I never asked, which I wanted to ask, is, are you sure you want to marry him, type thing. But I could not say anything about triune God. That's what, because you can't do that, because that's multiple gods type thing. There's one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet type thing. So,
well, I assume that if a bunch of Jews heard him, the authorities, that he could be stoned, right? This is certainly blasphemy.
well, he's in trouble in a couple of different ways, right? First of all, with Jewish religious authorities, that's number one, but also with whom? With Romans, because who's the God?
Oh, yeah, the emperor.
Caesar. And what are you saying? Are you saying, trying to put him up? That's one thing that got them in trouble as well. And so how does Jesus respond? Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. Notice he says, Simon, son of Jonah. I read something interesting that said that anytime he says Simon, son of Jonah, there's going to be some important pronouncement made about Simon Peter. You don't see him say that except a couple of times. So, as you're reading through, check it out, see if it's true or not. I think it is, but it was something I had not sought before. He does not call him just Simon. He does not call him Peter yet, but Simon, son of Jonah. And notice why he is blessed. Because of what was said. But what is said about what was said? I think I got that right. That got confusing.
It came from God, didn't come from your head.
So is it really Peter, Simon Peter, that's saying that? It is God speaking it through Simon Peter. I find that interesting. If you look real close, that's what he says. It comes from my Father in heaven. You know, before, go back to Jesus' baptism. What happened there? Jesus, as he's coming up out of the water, exactly what that means. He's coming up, and what happens?
God says, "This is my beloved son."
Yeah, we have a using Old Testament language, a Shekinah or a Shekinah, this physical manifestation of God there, because there's what appears to be a dove. And how many times does the Holy Spirit appear as a dove in the Bible? I think one time.
Okay.
I think it's just at this time. Check that one out too. If you find the other ones, let me know. But it's here at this time. Interesting. And what happens there? Who speaks?
God.
Well, technically God the Father, right? We would say God the Father. You use this, interestingly, that as a text against, what was the fancy name? There are some people who say that sometimes God acts as Father, sometimes as Son, and sometimes as Holy Spirit. And you can use this one to show what? That God the Father is active at the moment, as God the Son is active, and God the Holy Spirit, all three active. So it's not, so there are three distinct persons all active at one point. The Father speaks the profession here. Here, it is the Father causing the profession to be spoken through Simon, son of Jonah. So, yeah, he says it, but it's not that he came up with it on his own. It didn't like, wow, what do you know? He is. But instead, it's through the God working in him to bring that up. Yes, ma'am?
I'm interested in the Simon, son of Jonah. I never heard that before, and that's interesting, because what it makes me think of, as a parent, what did you do when your kid was in trouble? You didn't say Jennifer. You said Jennifer Ann, right?
I never was called Jennifer Ann when I got in trouble.
No, but I'm sure you had.
I had other things I was called, yeah.
Did
Yes.
they use James instead of Jim?
James William, yes.
Yeah.
When I was a kid in lower elementary school, I have a brother, John, who's a year and a half older than I, and a sister who's a couple of years older than both of us. And so she's the oldest, I'm the youngest. And we were picking strawberries out in the strawberry field for money. That's back before child labor laws said we couldn't do such things. And so you have a platoon leader. The platoon leader is usually a woman, at least all the ones I ever saw were. And they would make sure that they would send you to where you needed to go and do what you need to do. If you're goofing off, that person would reprimand you and things like that. By the way, and if my brother ever watches this, I think this is true, John, I was not the one that caused trouble. I know most of you will not believe that, but I was actually not the one. I was a good strawberry picker, because if I'm out in that hot sun in the afternoon, because it would get 100 degrees in Oregon then. It wasn't humid like it is now, but at 2 o'clock, you don't want to really be out there picking strawberries. And that's back in the era of transistor radios. Remember the little transistor radios all the kids had? Everybody had agreed to one station, because otherwise it would be terrible.
Yeah.
And so they'd have those in the little Hallex and the carriers and all of that. And I remember I just liked the Beatles at that point, who were brand new, because of one song. Can you think of the song? That's correct. Strawberry, it's not, let me take you down because we're going to. No, we don't want to be. Anyway, this, I'm going too far off, I apologize. But this person, when there was a problem, she could never tell my brother and myself apart. I don't know why. He was always skinny, I was not. And it was always Jim John. So she'd yell across the thing, Jim John, and we'd both have to look that thing. So yeah, so that was another how I got in trouble was Jim John. Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And here are the big words then. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Gates of Hades, many people, again, you know, the location, the whole thing about that cave association with not just Pan, but with an entrance to hell, that perhaps that's why Jesus took them there. He didn't say, this is why we're here, but if you want to make that argument, you can make that argument. Others try to say, no, it's not that. So I don't know, but think about what Jesus is saying. Remember when we first looked at this, It was you will be. And this time the verb tense has changed. It is a present. You are. Now what's changed? What's changed in Simon Peter that he is now Peter and not that he will be? The thing that has changed are the words that have come out of his mouth saying who Jesus is. Now, that didn't happen by himself. Obviously, it's Jesus is saying his Father in heaven is the one who helped him get to that point. But isn't that interesting? You are. And so this is a text where our dear Roman Catholic friends will talk about what? Not just the primacy, but the supremacy of Peter, as you know, and we'll use this text as a proof text for this. So what does it say? And on this rock, what is the rock referring to? It refers back to, it fits with Peter, and it refers back to the profession as well. It's on that Jesus, and notice what it says, it's not present tense. He goes back to I will build, which is future tense. What is the church built upon? Well, Paul says it, interesting, that Jesus is the cornerstone. A cornerstone in ancient buildings was used for what purpose?
Hold it up.
We stored material in it, right? Historical material, or
You would have the date that they started building.
Cornerstone gives shape to the building, does it not? That's where everything started from. What was the foundation stones upon which it was built? What would be next to that? Paul says what? The apostles and prophets. And then what happens from there on? You are living stones, so we are part of this living building. I think that's why we call the church building church, because it comes back to this type thing, although it's technically never called the building. But Jesus is the cornerstone from which everything else grows out. The first one, the first person, I guess you could say almost put next to him then, would be Simon Peter. And it's not because of what Simon himself said, but it came from God the Father that he was able to say this. Will others, and it goes on, right? I will build my church, and the gates, you know, the gates were, well, what are gates?
They let people in and keep people out.
Movable barriers.
Gates are used as a means of protection as well, right? If you have a city that's built with walls, a gate you would close that to keep the bad guys out, if you will. The gates of hell, of Hades, will not overpower. I was thinking about this one. So what does that say about today? If you're afraid for the future of the church, quote unquote, whatever that, however you define church, should you be afraid of future of church? What does Jesus say here? Can you feel the powers of Hades working against church? I mean, they always do. It has forever and ever and ever, and will continue to do so. But Jesus says, will not overpower it, will not overpower it. Katis kraimo, sorry, I'm not good at pronouncing Greek, to overpower, to overcome by a superior force. It will not do that. It is impossible for it to do that. Interesting. Cannot do that. The word church is an interesting one as well. Ecclesia, church, assembly. They could have chosen a lot of words for what became church, but you know the derivation of that word. Never told you that one? Okay, let's go back to ancient Greek city-states. And let's say that, I'm sorry, you'll all have to be male for this, and you're all male property owners, because I do not believe that females in that culture could own property. Please do not yell at me about that. I am not in that culture. So you are all, we'll just make you all property owners. It doesn't matter if you're male or female or something. And so now we are going to have an ecclesia. That means you will all come together. We will come and join. And we have problems with, we're having problems with flooding. So what are we going to do about the problems of flooding in our town? We are going to have a discussion. We are going to make a decision. And then what do? We go back out to where we have come from, to our homes and all, and carry out the decisions that are made. That's technically what the ecclesia was. Those who would come together to join, to discuss, to make decisions that they would go back out to their homes to carry out. So why did they choose that word for what became known as church? Why didn't they use synagogue? Christian synagogue, you could have made it called that. Because the church is people who come from wherever they are. You don't have to be landowners. You could be renters. I guess you could be homeless. And come to join together where we join together around that cornerstone, around Christ, where we learn more of him. We're built up, hopefully, and we're sent back out to do what? To carry out in our communities, wherever we live, what we learned and agreed to at that location. That's where the word comes from. That's the derivation.
But which church? I don't understand how that says church.
Church is Anglo-Saxon.
Okay.
And
The
see,
translation.
some of our words come from the German, which is, the Anglo-Saxon came from German.
Right.
And then others came from Greek or from Latin. So
So this
we
is
borrowed
just
from,
simply
but our main language and ordinary words are Anglo-Saxon. Fancier words come from Latin or Greek. Like drink is Anglo-Saxon.
What is?
Drink,
Okay.
but beverage. I
like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So most of our ordinary words, so I think, like Kirk is the
Yes,
first
yes.
Scottish.
That's right.
So I think it's Anglo-Saxon.
Okay.
So ecclesia, we use that word, right? How do we use that word? If we refer to church things, we refer to,
Ecclesiastic.
that's the word, yeah, so we use it still to this day. Although we don't use it as much as we did maybe 20 years ago.
Well, what about the book Ecclesiastes?
Yeah.
Different word.
That's what I thought.
Different
That's
word.
why I want to make sure.
This is Greek, that's Hebrew, so
Okay.
there. And never the twain, remember, they're written much different, completely different alphabets.
Yeah.
Hebrew goes from right to left.
Yeah.
Written with no vowels. So,
Well, and I noticed in my studies with Rabbi Foreman, they pronounce an awful lot of things differently. They're the same words, the same text. The words don't sound the same often.
See, there were a group of people called Masoretes, and I can't tell you when. They're the ones that in the Hebrew Bible that I have, the text, they will have these little vowel points, and those have been added. But if you're really good at Hebrew, you don't need those or anything, because you know what they would be based on all sorts of stuff. And that's way beyond me, I can tell you that, because I'm not very good at Hebrew. I studied Hebrew one summer in St. Louis. We called it Hebrew Wars, because St. Louis is hot and sticky like this. We had 2 hours class in the morning and 2 hour class in the afternoon.
Oh my goodness.
So it was very hot, and the building we were in that summer, they had air conditioning problems. So when you have air conditioning problems and it's not working, what do?
Sweat.
You open the windows, right? And you're always sweating. But that was also right outside the window. They were working on the roof.
Oh.
And when they're working on the roof, they have this tar machine.
Oh.
And so then the tar smell would come in. So after I told you it was Hebrew Wars, that's what it was. We would close that because it got so bad. And then it would go back and forth. So it was so fun. So when I think of Hebrew, I think of Hebrew Wars from that. Not war over other things, but the difficulties.
Germans like to suffer because my friend who had the same problems in San Diego, the professor just took them out to the swimming pool and they sat around their bathing suits. So it wouldn't have been a war then.
It would have been a little difficult with your Hebrew text, so it's a big book. And I say to you, you are. It's no longer you will be. You are Peter. And on this rock, and on you, this rock. Rock, notice, is a different word there. It's It is the same, it's based on the same Petros as Peter, Petra. It is a feminine singular noun type thing. So they come from the same area type thing. And one place I read, they tried to say that Petra is more like bedrock or a larger, and Petra is like a smaller stone. That's why I think that Michael Card calls his book that fragile stone type thing, because Peter, because he, well, yeah. And on this rock, this person, but it's not really so much the person, but the profession that the person has made, that really the person didn't make, but God the Father made through the person, that God is going to build the church. And Hades will not overpower him. And he goes on in verse 19. Sorry, I was going, I had to use a third page, so I just did a little bit here since I got too excited with words. You know, I do all these things for me to try to understand it better, and I just give them to you to do what you need to do. And notice here, we're future tense again. I will give you. He's had, it's not just giving them right now. I will give you. That you there is second person singular. I did check that one out. The keys of the kingdom of heaven. And so the you, second person singular, to whom is Jesus speaking? This is Simon Peter still, right? It is Simon Peter, you know, so our Roman Catholic friends are going, yeah, because it's the keys are given to Peter. Simon Peter, it says it right here. I'm sorry, will be given. It's future tense. And whatever you bind, I'm sorry, I noticed after I printed these out, on the third block on the right-hand side, see what I have to put these little blocks there and put text in, and so I copy one and drop it in. I forgot to take out the keys on that. It should be kingdom. Basileia is kingdom, so if you're making notes, sorry about that. You can see it is a kingdom, and you can see actually after Basileia, it says kingdom there is the translation, but sorry about that. I noticed that again. I didn't print all of them. I thought you could deal with that. I will give you the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth, that's whatever you bind, that's second person singular, active, aorist, will have been bound. And so that's actually the word to be is used with bind, will have been bound. Notice it's kind of an interesting, it will have, it's going to happen in the future, but it will almost like past tense too type thing. In heaven, and whatever you loose, again, that's a singular, on earth will have been loosed in heaven. So the luo is loose. And again, the same thing, the to be and to be loosed type thing. It's interesting that this is given to Peter here. So that's why my picture back here I still have up, right? So here he's giving the keys to Peter. And so the folks who put this stuff together, they have, here's Peter again. Notice the big key he has. He has the big key to heaven type thing. And here again, oh, you saw that picture of Peter before. Another one picture here of Jesus giving keys. Here are some keys from that time frame. Of course, we can't see exactly how big it is there, but they're interesting, strange-looking keys even. This was a key with a horse's head. Now, I don't think that would be the key that Jesus would give or something. I don't know what would be on the key to heaven. No, okay. Now we're going to Jerusalem there. Sorry.
All right.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
This has always been a problem for me. Talking to Peter, you figure it out and heaven will follow you. We'll just accept whatever you do. And that's been, when I was a kid, that was the attitude of the Catholic Church. Like, Peter is sovereign. If he says women are trash, then women are trash in heaven. And I just have a hard time with this, with what he's told me to do.
So I think the interesting difference there is, I'm going to look, I had written it down. Yeah, here we go. I think when I look at this, I see as a primacy given to first, but not the supremacy over all. And the Roman Catholic Church would say he has it over everyone. Because you can look that Jesus then gives to the rest of the disciples the same ability with the keys. It's not given just to Simon Peter, and it's given to all. I have that written down here.
In another place or in this?
In another place, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 18. Pull that open. I didn't actually write it out, but I wrote it down. Matthew 24, Matthew 18. Turn the page. Oh, let me read the section. Start at verse 15. If your brother sins against you, remember this? Go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. If he does not listen, even take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. Remember, that's used to try to help resolve the issue and restore the broken relationship rather than hit them over the head with a baseball bat to make them do what you think they should do. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church, the ecclesia. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, the ecclesia, let him be to you a Gentile and a tax collector. And that means a person who needs to learn about faith in Jesus. It does not mean to exclude him and have nothing to do with them. I think that's the mistake that has been made in the past. And when people are excommunicated from church, this does happen, not too much anymore, people usually take it that way and say, well, if you kick me out, I want nothing to do with you either. It's not for that purpose. It's to restore, to show the severity of something that's happened and to have them change. Truly I say to you, here's verse 18, whatever you, that's plural, he's talking to his disciples, not just to Simon Peter, whatever you bind in heaven shall be bound, bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Is that pretty close to what we just saw there, except it's second person singular, this is second person plural? So, yeah, it's not just Simon Peter. It is all of the disciples. I think, technically, we say it's given to the church. The power is given to the church. Simon as a representative early on, yes, but our Roman Catholic friends would say, no, it's Simon is overall. So,
The binding and loosing, doesn't that refer to, well, it says in here, obligations or contracts. It's not that Peter can say women are trash. I mean, I think it's an agreement. I can let you out of your obligation if I think that's what it means.
And I think that the emphasis, though, on the whole thing, the emphasis, though, seems to be on dealing with the reality of sin and what that means in a person's life. I think that's where it will go toward. It's used specifically in Matthew 18 with regards to that, right? So I think we could put that the same here with Matthew 16, that it deals with that area. So if the idea is given is to the church, and it says it elsewhere, we don't have time to go into that today because we're going faster than that the power is given to church to forgive or retain sins. That's a pretty big power, because technically if I say as church, if we say that your sin is not forgiven, these texts would say that, no, that's pretty big. I mean, that's really big, that authority. But it must be used in a way which would be pleasing to God and in that. And I think, if we're here, I don't have my picture back right now. If we're at the gates of hell, we're not trying to throw people in, are we?
Get him out.
Or do you have some people you want to throw in? Hey, I know somebody needs to go there. No, I think our point is you don't want to go there. But the reality is that if you continue along this path, that's where you're headed. And it's a warning, if you will. So I think it's important not to say, well, you're out of here, goodbye. But I think instead it's an attempt to turn a person from their way they're going. And anytime you get into a hierarchy, that things are going to be used in interesting and unfortunate ways at times. And I'm sorry, that's just the reality that it does happen. Miss Cynthia, I have to go to her because I get in trouble if I don't do
To me, there seems to be an expectation that they are to remain in him. And the Father would be revealing to them, just like they did about who Jesus is. The Father would be in contact with them, would reveal to them what needs to be loosed, what needs to be done.
You know, most churches have, most Lutheran churches that I've ever seen, and I've looked at some, lots of constitutions because being a circuit visitor, they all have something about excommunication. Can you remember the last time you ever excommunicated anybody? Usually what happens in churches, we say the person has self-excluded themselves, or however you want to do that. But the idea behind it is that Matthew 18 passage. You talk to the individual. I mean, we don't do that really well. People will say something, you know, I've heard people tell me that things that others have done, you need to talk to that person. I don't want to. Technically, what Jesus says is you deal with the reality of the broken relationship yourself. If it is you are unable to resolve that, not the person agrees with you, but you're unable to resolve the brokenness, you bring one or two others. Again, the emphasis is on resolving the broken relationship. If that doesn't happen, you take it to the church, not so you can all say, what a terrible person Sammy Sue is, you know, it's terrible, let's all shun her forever. But the person, because of their behavior, has not received the forgiveness that is offered there because they have not repented, and an unwillingness to repent, and therefore they're excluding themselves from what happens in the church. And so what you're doing is showing a reality of, you know, you are not a member here because you have done this. You are not accepting the forgiveness that's here offered and the restored relationship. I don't know if you've seen people who are unwilling to forgive something. You know, that's not right. That's pretty profound, right? That's not right. That's not Christian. Jesus says, forgive as you've been forgiven. Well, I have a lot of forgiveness. I should mess up a lot. Please don't point out all the times right now. We don't have enough time. But the point then of an excommunication is that person, was it Sammy Sue? I think I made up some name. Sammy Sue. Then that person, what does that person need? That person needs a relationship with Jesus where they understand what forgiveness is about. And that's what needs to happen. Unfortunately, many times in the church then, people have nothing to do with that person. They shun them. The most famous group of shunners are the Amish, obviously, right? But there are lots of people who shun others in a variety of ways. You can sometimes see that happen in local congregations where people will not have anything to do with another person who's in that congregation. You've seen it, I've seen it, it's terrible. But the idea then is that sometimes, unfortunately, Sammy Sue says, well, if you don't want me, then I don't want you. And that becomes a problem. What Jesus is trying to say here is that this power is given, here it's given to Simon Peter, because of the profession that he was able to make, this profession of faith, which we believe he believes at that point, yet came through the power of the Father. He has this authority, but the authority must be used in a judicious way, because that's a lot to say that if you say it's bound, it's bound. If you say it's loose, that's pretty big power, and it's given to church. Again, Matthew 18:18 shows it's given to more than just Simon Peter. He may have got it first, but it's given to the entire church. And so, you know, it's a complete other discussion about the whole thing about Pope and stuff like that.
There's a section in our catechism about that from Martin Luther.
Yep.
Way back when.
So now what's interesting then is if this is saying who Simon is, right? You are Peter, this rock on which church ecclesia will be built. Then Jesus says this is who he, Jesus, is. That's verse 21. And it tells you something about Simon Peter. From then on, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed and be raised the third day. Notice what it says. From then on, we have 3 occasions. Generally, I've been taught that they are called passion predictions because they are predicting Jesus' suffering and death and resurrection. And each one becomes a little more clear, more precise. And by the 3rd set, you're going, hey, that's what's going to happen. It's almost word for word. And these are found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John does something different. His is much different type stuff, a complete different outline and such. And so, who is Jesus? Jesus is saying, this is who I am. You have said, I am son, right? I am son of God. This is what it means for me to be son of God. This is what it means for me to be here. It is necessary. It must happen that I will go to Jerusalem. I will suffer many things. Yeah, he did. I will be killed. That's what happened. Be raised the 3rd day. And this person then, this person who is now called Peter, what did he say? Verse 22. Ouch. You know, Peter got it, and now what does he do? Oh no! Or I wrote in the parenthesis there. The text that I give you is from the Christian Standard Bible. I found it an interesting translation. You know, you're free to use whatever you want. Far be it from you, Lord, is the literal wording of it. This must never happen to you. So what is Peter saying? Jesus, this is who you are. These things must happen to you. This must not happen to you. Now, he kind of messed up what he just said, didn't he? But if you look at each time that Jesus does a passion prediction, there will be a misunderstanding. Each time. Every single time. And he will then clarify it afterwards. You have to go to the words after, starting in verse 21. In verse 22 and 23 and such, where it will go to further clarify it. But notice Peter takes him aside. Can you imagine rebuking Jesus? To rebuke, to reprove him. No, Jesus, this is incorrect. What you are saying is wrong. My goodness, it takes courage to say that. Simon is speaking perhaps before he should think and all that type of stuff. And what does Jesus say to him? Ouch! That's what I would say if these words were spoken to me. Get behind me, Satan. Wow. From Peter to Satan. In how many words? Not very good. You are a hindrance, a stumbling block. What is a stumbling block? What is a hindrance?
On the wall. Can't get through it.
You're going to fall over it, right? It's going to seek to stop you from doing what you are supposed to do and or accomplish. Because you're not thinking about God's concerns or the things of God, but the things of men. I found that interesting. I was looking and I use a program called Logos that has text in it and gives me stuff to help give me all these lovely things because I'm not really great in Greek either. And so I'm going, where's the word for concerns or things? It's not there. It's what's going on? And so that's why that last little block is there on the bottom left-hand side. The word ho. So you now know a Greek word, ho. That little thing on top of the H, of the O there, is the H sound. So it's not just O, it's ho. Like as in ho, ho, ho type thing or something. And so this is what I found. In their inflections, the definite article. This is a definite article for the. Basically, it's the. 543 occurrences, you find it. And the AV, what's AV? That's a type of a Bible. The Bible, the AV is the authorized version, which is, I think it's authorized by King James or something, but anyway. But notice how it's translated. So in certain senses, it's translated in this way. And so the things is probably the best one. Because you're a hindrance, because you're not thinking about God's, but about humans' things, concerns. That's the problem. So you need to change your heart and mind. So Peter, who, my goodness, he was doing pretty good. And then now he falls. I'll read you a quote. This is from the end of this chapter, this portion of the study from Michael Card. 3 short paragraphs. Jesus and Peter are both rocks in their own unique ways. Jesus forever the solid rock, Simon always, but by grace, a fragile stone. In the intimacy of their sometimes volatile friendship, they will strive to reflect the truth of who they are to each other for the short amount of time they have left. If you are the sort of person who usually reads books like this, you would no doubt confess that Jesus is your friend. If that is true, then my question is, how does he define you? He began defining us all when he told us we were sinners. Then he gave us a hunger to know him, and we followed. But how long ago was that? And in the meantime, what has the complexion of your friendship looked like? In Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, he hints that at the fact that someday he will give us a white stone with a new name, our new name. Perhaps for Simon, his was Peter, and Jesus simply could not wait. Perhaps for Simon, it was Peter, and Jesus simply could not wait to let him know. But what do you think your name might be? What might he call you? What will he call me? Interesting way to conclude, because we were at 10:45 and our time is up. Interesting. So we have a short prayer. Gracious Lord, help us to live up to the name that you will give each of us. May we bear that name Christian proudly and boldly, and may we live it out in our everyday lives. Help us to be like Simon Peter, and to be bold in our profession, but to follow and listen to you as you reprove us when we fail, and guide us and direct us to the way we should go. We ask this in your most precious name. Amen. Thank you, ladies and germs. Germs?
I have figs. Big bush last evening.